Good evening. Hey, Sid.
Hare Krishna, Laksmi.
How are you?
Just fine.
Wonderful.
I'm meeting with Adi Kartza on 5 o'clock on
Wonderful.
Friday.
Great to hear. So what time do we have? Okay. Let's begin with a little chanting, as we normally do. Gratitude to our teacher or teachers, those who illuminate our path with the torchlight of knowledge. Om Jnanatimirandasya Vinanjana Shalakaya Chakshuro Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadam Tikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mahate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatya Deshatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaura Premanandi. Okay, we are continuing our journey through Bhagavad Gita, currently in chapter 16. And this particular chapter is entitled by Srila Prabhupada, the divine and demonic nature. So we read, last class we read, I think we did 1 through 3, and we discussed it fairly exhaustively, just a lot to cover in those 3 verses. So we'll pick up on 4. What I'll do is just to keep us in sync with what's being discussed here, the divine and demonic natures. I'll read 1 through 3 again, and then pick up. I won't comment because I commented last week, but then we'll start with 4. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, nonviolence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy, and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharat, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature. All right. And we discussed a lot of those qualities last week. Text 4, pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demonic nature, O son of Pritha. So here we have a list. Pride, number 1. Arrogance, number 2. Conceit, anger, 4. Harshness and ignorance. So 6. Krishna is talking about 6 qualities of the demonic nature. Now some people may recoil at the use of the term divine and demoniac, but basically we'll recognize we all have our bright side and we have our dark side. So these are the 2 basic natures Krishna is describing here in terms of our existence, that we have 2 natures. Krishna terms it divine, and that means qualities and a perspective on life that is liberating, that can bring us to the point of understanding that who we actually are. It is the false ego that is keeping us shrouded by an illusion of who we actually are. But it is the divine nature, the cultivation, and actually having those qualities that we just discussed in verses 1 through 3, those qualities and the cultivation of those qualities help us to, along our path, our spiritual progression, because the quintessential quality is not renunciation, and it is not even knowledge, but the quintessential quality in terms of us making advancement on our path is sincerity. Rupa Goswami says that in the Nectar of Devotion, to be sincere. Another term for sincerity would be honesty, straightforwardness, as opposed to those who are duplicitous. Simplicity means straightforward and honestly approaching our life and the challenges that we come across in terms of our life. So this particular verse Prabhupada is discussing the different qualities here. So these are the characteristics of a demonic nature. And as I said, we all have our bright side, we have our dark side of the moon. So there are some who are more comfortable with the mindset of the dark side. There are some who have and continue to cultivate the qualities of the bright side. And mostly all of us live somewhere in between, that we succumb to our dark side sometimes. And we know intrinsically that our bright side is the side really that we want to be on. Unless someone is really far advanced into the demonic mindset and consciously exploits people and belittles people, when they get that kind of attitude where they are either very comfortable with that perspective or they enjoy it, to be to put people down, to criticize, to exploit. They derive some kind of pleasure. I mean, that's pretty deeply invested in the dark side of the character, one's nature. And the more you invest in that, the harder it is for you to see that is your dark side. There's so many excuses, there's so many reasons why you are criticizing or exploiting others, justifiable reasons in one's mind. But I found it very interesting in reading the commentary by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, my teacher, in his translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is called the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and that means as Krishna spoke it, not as we speculate it. So I found it very interesting to note that Prabhupada in his commentary mentions that the first thing when he talks about pride and arrogance, the first thing he mentions is religion is a show for those of the demoniac nature. So it's not like there's no religion, that they're atheists, but the religion has a different purpose. According to Srila Prabhupada's definition of religion, means the process by which you develop your love for God. Whereas if you are invested into the dark perspective, dark side of your mind, then religion is a means to an opportunity to put on a show. And I've seen some really incredible performers who are pretending to be religious minded people. They just put on a great show. I've seen this in televangelism and so many other differences, but religion is a show. And that show is, who is the star of that show? For a devotee, for one who is of divine mindset, of course, humility is a quality or a characteristic that is very much a part of one's divine nature. So religion, for one who is humble and one who is honest, possessing those two qualities, is truly a process by which I can cultivate my love and devotion for God, for the Supreme. Whereas here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that for those who are invested in their dark side, the demoniac side, they see religion as a great opportunity to exploit others, to bamboozle or to trick or to, based on pretense, to demonstrate how religious I am, how much in love with God I am, how great a devotee I am. They're invested in that way. So religion that is a show, a pretense for getting what you want for yourself, self-centeredness, religion from the self-centered perspective, that in the Bhagavad Gita is described as being a demonic nature, demonic character. And we know that pride is an inflated sense of oneself. So when you're in religion, an inflated sense of oneself will be, I am so religious, I am so advanced, I am I am the mouthpiece of God, and therefore you should listen to me. I am an authority because I am the mouthpiece. I read a book, an interesting book some years ago called The Power of Spiritual Abuse. And it was written by two people who were involved in Christianity, and apparently quite good Christians, humble Christians, and their recognition of how this spiritual abuse, or one who takes on a leadership position and exploits others through humiliation, speaking to them condescendingly, demanding that they show themselves respect from others. You must give me respect. I am the leader of this church. I am the figure, the authoritative figure, etc. And how when someone is not genuinely cultivating love for God, that position can be used to exploit unknowing, well-intentioned, yet manipulatable people into, we've seen throughout the course of history, you have the old Jim Jones debacle where, he assumed a role as a spiritual leader and guided everyone into suicide. I mean, that's an extreme, but it shows you, it's practical demonstration how when one is demoniac in a mindset and is involved in religion and gets caught up in that, and in the pride, in the arrogance, and the condensation, the haughtiness, and puts that all on display in the name of religion, and we could see how that can progress to the degrees that historically we've seen it progress, where people are taken advantage of to horrible extremes and are convinced or coerced to do things which are detrimental to their spiritual well-being, their emotional well-being, their mental well-being, and their physical ultimately, when those things are challenged, and of course your physical well-being follows suit. So it's an interesting thing. Arrogance, so as pride is an inflated sense of oneself, arrogance is an overbearing pride or haughtiness, which is an attitude on display. One may be proud, but when it comes out in the form of haughtiness or overbearing pride, and all the qualities that I was discussing, primarily an emphasis on me, a huge self-centeredness. Quite often I see articles written on narcissism. So I guess you could say that condition, which is identified as narcissistic, we could say is parallels some of the things that are being discussed here in Gita. Now keep this in mind. This is Krishna's divine perspective on the nature, the absolute or the relative nature of us here in humanity. An arrogant person may behave in a condescending or dismissive manner towards others, often believing themselves to be superior or more important than those around them. So we see dismissive, they may not say it openly, and sometimes they will say it openly. Oh, you are of no value. Your opinion is of no value. Your feelings are of no value. That may not be the spoken word, but it's definitely translated as such in one's actions and words towards others. Dismissiveness and condescension. Condescension means that you look down at other people. You look down, that person does not have any real value, or that value is minimal compared to the value that I have. That's the negative or dark kind of mindset towards others, that you have no value, and dismiss your opinion, your value to whatever as not important. So this is the mindset, as Krishna discusses here in Bhagavad Gita, of a demoniac nature. Desire, one of the motivating forces is to be recognized, worshipped. So there's fame, adoration, and distinction. So this becomes the motivational force, to be worshipped by others, to be recognized, to become famous. And a lot of the time, as I said, when Prabhupada comments on this, he talks in terms of people's attitude towards religion. Some people take on religion so that they become famous, adored, and distinctive from all the rest. So that desire to be worshipped by others is very dangerous, and it's a very powerful motivational force. Pride in one's wealth and pride in one's education. Again, when we talk about being condescending, looking down upon others, usually that comes from this overinflated sense of the value of wealth and education in relationship to a person and other people. In other words, I have a PhD and you don't. Maybe you went to college, maybe you didn't, and I'm definitely much more educated than you. Like I said, normally you don't hear this, but it's translated through one's action and words towards other people. So that's the danger of education, in the sense if it builds up the ego, the false notion, the overinflated notion that I am great, I am beyond others. That and wealth also can do that. When you have money, and I've seen this numerous times, where people who have a lot of money are really catered to by the general mass of people. If a person has a lot of money, then that person is seen as, this is such and such, and they have the power to help me with their money or whatever. So they have that's a tendency, pride, that I have so much money, I have the ability to make money, you don't. And that gives them the mindset which separates them from others and gives and reinforces an overinflated sense of oneself. This is really important to understand in that regard. It helps one to justify putting themselves over others. So Prabhupada describes this as being of the demoniac mindset. And as I said, this is a mindset that's both cultivated and received through karma. In other words, in previous lives or life, one was in a very exalted position and had deeply ingrained within them that mindset, because I'm of nobility, I'm of wealth, I'm of superior education, etc. You can carry that over, that perspective, that nature into your next life. So these qualities of pride and arrogance and all these different qualities, their desire to be worshipped, etc., are both karmic and cultivated in the life that we're in. So this is an interesting point also. When one demands respect, Prabhupada quite often would say that one should act in such a way that they command respect. In other words, by virtue of their qualification, in a person who is elevated, an elevated person doesn't have to demand respect, doesn't have to require it from others. That person is recognized. So by virtue of one's action and the qualities that we imbibe and exhibit, then that will command the respect of others. And again, if we talk about, in religion, if a person is, honestly and purely doing their religious duties, then people will recognize that without any requirement to do that recognition. There's no requirement, there's no demand that you respect me. That by virtue of purity, by virtue of honesty, then one will receive respect. And if someone doesn't give you respect, then maybe it's not your issue at all. Maybe it's the issue of the other person, that they can't or won't. They want the respect. And therefore, until they get that respect, they won't give out respect. So this demanding respect rather than commanding respect, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, is the mindset of the demonic nature. Easily angered, one who is easily angered over the smallest trifle, that is also one thing that Prabhupada says is the mindset or the perspective of demoniac nature. That even the smallest of things, we are not the controllers. Unless we are highly elevated individuals, totally surrendered at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then there is influence of the modes of material nature, and particularly Rajagun and Tamagun. And when Rajagun and Tamagun affect us, deeply affect us, passion and ignorance, then we have a nature that, like I said, seeks to be respected, seeks to control. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, which is a nice psychological breakdown, Dhyayato Vishayang Pungsa Sangas Teshu Vijayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Krodha Vijayate. So what's kama? Kama means intense desire or lust. And when lust and desire cultivated within the heart, it has a tendency to cause anger. So this intense desire can manifest itself in the terms of controlling, highly controlling nature, super angry nature. We call it quick trigger anger, repeatedly, constantly, over even the smallest of things. So Krishna says here, and Prabhupada comments on that this is a symptom of demoniac nature. What's the result? Speaking harshly towards others, condescendingly, and cannot tolerate any return argument. Now, take into consideration, that doesn't mean you're a demon. It just means that we all have chinks in our armor or weaknesses. So this might be one of the weaknesses that show up due to the influence of the modes of nature, like ignorance and passion, again, due karmically or conditionally, or even consciously cultivating this. But this is speaking harshly towards others. What kind of response do we get when we do that, when we speak harshly to others? We usually get, from the stronger minded people, confrontation. From the weaker, person who's not so strong mentally, or doesn't like confrontation, they will either submit, forceful. They feel forced into submission, or they will retreat. It's the old fight or flight. That's what we do. Humans have a tendency to fight or to flee a situation. So when we're being spoken to in a way that's either condescending or harsh or filled with anger, if we're kind of gentle by nature, then we have a tendency to withdraw. If we're more passionate by nature, we have a tendency to fight back. So this is part of the demonic nature. Another thing that Prabhupada talks about is confused about what should be done and should not be done. Or we consistently choose erroneously what shouldn't be done. We don't have that purified intelligence or that fine-tuned intelligence, which tells us intelligence, when it is purified, has the strength to dictate to the mind. If the intelligence is not purified, if the intelligence, like the mind, is filled with lust, then the mind has a tendency to dictate to the intelligence. And what does the intelligence do? It's an aspect of the mind, which is the power of the mind. The mind has its basic things where it receives input from the senses. It kind of makes sense of that input. We get a ton of information coming at us through sense perception, sense connection with the objects of the senses, and the mind makes sense of it all and categorizes it, stores it, and utilizes it in various ways. The intelligence is what is the function of the mind, or the overall overmind, chitta, which helps us to discriminate, to determine what is to be done and what is not to be done. But if someone is of a demonic nature, then due to the influence of passion and ignorance, there is an inability to understand what is to be done and what should be done, what should not be done. It's very difficult to make that connection. So what'll happen is we will be prone. What does sin mean? And there's, of course, I've said this several times in the course of my lectures, that sin is a very Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic religion kind of word and term, which means you break God's law from that perspective. But it also means, from its origin, if you look at that word etymologically, it also means making the wrong judgment call. So when we are consumed or influenced, prominently influenced by a demoniac side, our dark side, then the intelligence is not there, and we don't know what should be done or what should be done. Very confused about it. And one acts whimsically. Now, when I say whimsically, that means that basically I do what I want to do. Whether it's hurtful to other people, whether it's exploitative of other people, etc. It's just, I just want to do this. That kind of whimsy is there, and that is also part of the demonic nature that Krishna is talking about here in the 16th chapter. Whereas, on the other hand, of a divine nature, one doesn't act whimsically. One acts according to regulations, rules, moral codes, rather than, this is going to be, like, for instance, if you can manipulate a situation where you can steal something, and that is obviously not the intelligent thing to do. But yet, if your mind works that way, the intelligence is not strong enough to say, no, that's going to come back at you. Because the reality is, if you steal something from someone, you're going to get a karmic impact. There's going to be a reaction to that, and you're going to lose eventually. And usually, as the law of karma dictates, when you take something from someone, you have something taken from you in spades, meaning much more than what you took as part of the reaction. And conversely, if you are giving, lovingly giving, like in charity, etc., the reaction is much more in just giving in charity to, like, a material kind of organization. In other words, an organization that feeds people, an organization that gives shelter to people like that. And you give in donation to that. You have the St. Jude's Children's Cancer Fund. And, there's so many things that are out there, that charitable organizations that you can give your money to, which would be considered a very highly moral and charitable thing to do. So the reaction to that is 4 times greater than what you gave. And you see, in Indian culture, that is very deeply ingrained in the Indian mindset. If you are from India, you recognize the fact that if I give in charity, then there is good results to that. And I think even in Muslim culture, there is that kind. I think probably in every religious traditions, there's an understanding of that principle. But specifically in Vedic culture, you receive just for giving to mundane causes, planting trees, building parks, whatever that may be, that that is beneficial to humanity, you get 4 times the return. But when you, in charity, you give to someone or some organization that is helping people spiritually, like when you buy a book of Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, that's why there's emphasis on that, giving sacred literature to people, because the end result of you giving to something that's purely spiritual is 1,000-fold the response that you get from that. What to speak of the purification of the heart. So all of these are both, like I said, these are important things. And the characteristic of one who is demoniac in nature gives in charity so that they can get some sense of self-worth or recognition, etc. And the motive always is I, me, mine. It's all about me as the center focus, even in an attempt to be charitably disposed. So let us move on. Number 5, text number 5. The transcendental qualities, the divine qualities that we spoke about in verse 1 through 3, like cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, etc. So the cultivation of these qualities are conducive to liberation, whereas the demoniac qualities make for bondage. So when we talked about pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance, those are qualities that keep us bound to the material world. It keeps the mindset, keeps us within the cycle, the samsara cycle, the birth, old age, disease, death, rebirth, keeps us in that cycle. So Krishna is saying here, the cultivation of demoniac qualities make for bondage. Do not worry, O son of Pandu, for you are born with the divine qualities. Well, you can see, if you know the story of the Gita coming from the Mahabharata, you see that there were 2 sets of cousin brothers. The Pandavas, the 5 Pandava brothers, versus Duryodhana and his 99 brothers. And you see the difference in perspective of the world. And the qualities that Arjuna and his brothers exhibited were unlike the qualities that Duryodhana, who was harsh, cruel, angry, prideful, all of these qualities. So you see, right in that story in the Mahabharata of the Pandavas versus the Kurus, the Kauravas, you see actually in play what are divine qualities as opposed to demoniac qualities. And who is Krishna attracted to? And who did Krishna reciprocate with? Those of divine nature. They want to submissively, humbly engage in service to the Supreme. While on the other hand, those of demoniac want to be the Supreme, want to be served. That is their goal. So Duryodhana, he wanted the leadership. He wanted to be the emperor, even though it wasn't rightfully his. He did everything, including assassination attempt. He tried to poison Bhima. He tried to burn the Pandava brothers in a house that was made of flammable materials. And there were so many attempts by Duryodhana, dastardly deeds, to try to get rid of the Pandavas so that he could be in that emperor position. So right there, it's good to, just by studying that story of the Mahabharata, Pandavas versus the Kauravas, you will see in action the divine nature versus demoniac nature. You always have this good versus evil. So that would be a very good thing to study, just to see all this. Krishna tells Arjuna, don't worry. I'm telling you this so that you know, you have knowledge. But you, Arjuna, you are of a divine nature. You didn't want to jump into war. Duryodhana did. When Krishna went to Duryodhana with a proposal that would avoid warfare and the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives, it was more than fair. And this is what we were saying before, intelligence, the ability to discriminate between what's good and what's bad. And what's good means that it has a wide-reaching effect, not just what's good for me, but it has a greater effect. So when Krishna went to Duryodhana with a proposal that would avoid the battle of Kurukshetra and the subsequent death of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of warriors, Duryodhana refused. He said, no way am I going to accept this. I will not give the Pandavas anything, not one grain of land, not enough land that you can fit through the eye of the needle. I will not give him that much land. Even though the Pandavas were the rightful heirs to King Pandu's throne, which included a vast empire of wealth and citizenry and power, that even the Pandavas wanted to avoid war. They were willing to give up most of what rightfully was theirs. So you see, that is the display, the practical display of divine quality. Now we can see this in terms of our own life. It's sometimes, if we're willing to, in situations that may arise, if we're willing to compromise, if we're willing to take the high road in a situation, well, that's a practical display of a divine nature, that you do not want to incite quarrel or any kind of disturbance or confrontation, and you're willing to respect. What does respect mean? To look again. Re means again. In English, the prefix re, respect. Spect comes from the word spectacle, or from Latin, spect means to see. So to look again. So you look at a situation again with the attitude of fairness. What is fair to both parties? Whereas a person who's influenced by a demoniac nature, it's very hard for them to be fair. Because first and foremost is me. My universe has me in the center, and everything is in service to my desires. Why is there so much discord in the world? Because if we have millions and millions of people with that mindset, everything is meant for my benefit and my enjoyment. Everybody's thinking like that. So how can you avoid conflict? It's impossible to avoid conflict. Just like you see politically. in this country. Can you avoid conflict? No, because both parties, political parties, have nothing good to say about the other. When you see divisiveness rather than unity, and a radical defense of divisiveness, this is what has to be done. You have to stomp on the other in order to get us to where we should be, to make this country great again. We have to stomp on others. Well, that can never, ever bring unity. So the demoniac nature doesn't look for unity. The only unity that a demoniac nature looks for is that if you agree with me, then we can unify. But as soon as you have a contrary opinion, then what is one of the qualities? Dismissiveness. I dismiss you, and I dismiss your value. So Krishna says here, O son of Pandu, for you are born, do not worry, for you are born with the divine qualities. Text 6, O son of Prita, in this world there are two kinds of created beings. One is called divine and the other demoniac. I already explained to you at length the divine qualities, and now hear from me of the demoniac. It's interesting, even philosophy can be tainted by a divine perspective or a demoniac perspective. Did you ever hear the story of the vulture and the jackal? Well, there's a story of the vulture and the jackal. Once a boy died, and his relatives, lamenting with great emotion, gathered around the body in preparation for the funeral ceremony. Suddenly, a jackal appeared, and with sweet words began to glorify the affection which those present felt for the boy. He also began to speak of the boy's wonderful qualities, and then requested those present to spend the precious hours until sunset, before which the body should be cremated, bathed in sweet remembrances of the boy. They could return in the morning to burn the body, he said. Meanwhile, a vulture, after eyeing the situation from above, swooped down. He immediately began philosophically refining the jackal's words. Refuting the jackal's words. The vulture explained that the soul, the actual loved one within the body, had already departed, and that lamenting for a dead body was simply sentimental and foolish. The vulture then recommended that all present should become philosophically fixed in the difference between body and soul, and should leave without further lamentation. In this way, the vulture, who would feast on the body if the relatives left, spoke to defeat the jackal's argument. Of course, the jackal, being a creature of the night, planned to devour the body in the dark. So both of them waxed philosophical. So there's a divine perspective. Philosophy means seeing life and the purpose of life. So there are philosophies that look at life, and if it's for my benefit, again, the self-centeredness, if it's for my benefit, then I'll adopt this philosophy, right? And there may be different avenues of approach, just like the jackal had his avenue of approach. Oh, he was sweet, he was flattering, etc. Yeah, you should go and you should remember this boy. Go away, give it some time where you're remembering this sweet boy. And in the meantime, the jackal would eat the body. And the vulture, oh no, you're not the body, you're the soul. And almost quoting Bhagavad Gita, the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. So the vulture was saying that. He was waxing philosophically. This body is what? It's earth, water, fire, air. It's going to go dust to dust, ashes to ashes. It's going to go back. So why just leave the body and go? So what? The vulture could eat the boy. Both of them really, in their philosophy, had no concern for others. It was to justify their gratification. So we have to be very careful. That's why to study Bhagavad Gita, it gives us an intelligence, a philosophical, fine-tuned philosophical intelligence that not only simultaneously makes sense of the world, but it purifies the heart, by which such purification will give us the ability to see things as they are, clearly, with great clarity. That is why one of the many reasons that we study the philosophy of yoga as contained in Bhagavad Gita, so that we have this strength and clarity and purity of intelligence, so that when life's challenges come or opportunities arise, we don't simply just think about how I will gain for it, but there's Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas means ultimate benefit, Preyas means immediate benefit. Immediate benefit means how I gratify my senses, which include the mind. Ultimate benefit means how will this impact my path of liberation. So those are the two things to consider. So now Krishna will get into an extended discussion about demoniac qualities. He'll go all the way up to text 20, if you want to read on a little bit. There's only 24 verses in this, so I would recommend you read from 7 to 24 if you'd like to do a little homework assignment, and be prepared for next week's class. So does anyone have any question or comment? The floor is now open for realizations, comments, questions, etc. Please feel free to do so. Okay, if there are no questions to ask or no comments to make, I'll end the class right here. Thank you so much for your kind attention and your participation. Your association is always greatly appreciated. Until we meet next week, you have a happy, healthy, and holy week ahead of you. Hare Krishna.